now the official newspaper of River Falls, to be included, and they never received a response. So I just would like to know if that's the case, and if it is, can they be added to the notification, the official notifications?
We can certainly talk about that.
Yeah, I'll give a quick reply. To be clear, the board nor I always give a response when someone goes to the microphone, somewhat depending on content and what the question is or their comment. But in this case, I would say that, yes, we've received that request a couple of different times. And I simply have not brought before the board the question. It would involve revision to a board policy that we have. Currently, we have a policy and it specifically states the other regional newspaper as being our school district newspaper. And where I would probably not correct you, but I'm going to rephrase your comment to say that no reply has been given to Pierce County. I always want to say Gazette, is that right? Journal, excuse me. I gave them the reply that I just gave to you, that it requires policy change. I, in a friendly and respectful manner, said, to be honest, it hasn't hit my priority screen yet. We got a few other things that we're working on right now, and it's a simple task to bring before the board. And in part, I can thank you for bringing this up because I think it's probably the first time the board ever heard about it, to be honest with you. So I've been sitting on it. I own the delay. I own the stall job. It's all on me. I've been carefully trying to discern in my own head a little bit and asking for some data regarding the distribution of both newspapers. And frankly, it's a little bit of mixed reviews, but I tend to lean towards, and I can tell the board that I'm leaning towards recommending the policy change, that we would go with the Pierce Journal, frankly, because there's a couple of reasons why, and we can cover that later, but one of which is the extent to which they are doing a more comprehensive job, in my subjective mind, of covering River Falls news as opposed and related to the other.
There is an expense.
Can there only be one?
You can pay
No.
for both, but from a taxpayer perspective, I'm not sure that we should be paying. We have to pay either newspaper, and we could, maybe that'll be a board decision that you want to continue to pay for both, and I will provide you with cost estimates when I bring that forward. We'll shoot for that I'll give myself till January, under promise, overachieve. Maybe it can happen next month, but we'll shoot for January, no later.
But certainly, we have talked about this. The two of us have talked about it, and the expense is something that we want to consider. So we would maybe be looking at the differences between the papers. But one more comment, and then we need to move on.
I just want to mention that I've had a number of people ask me how they can find the committee meeting times and places, and they look in the newspaper and it's not there. So I just thought, well, I'll bring it up and answer the question.
Yeah, they're looking in one newspaper, the Pierce County.
The Pierce County Journal is spreading in River Falls.
I would agree.
So the only issue I would have is, now you've got somebody at our February meeting saying, hey, wait a minute, we used to see your meetings posted in the Hudson Star, whatever they're calling it now.
Now you're hiding
Now
it
you're
from me.
not, well, now you're,
So
Switched.
I'm going to make sure that this gets onto an agenda so that we can have a proper conversation about it with the appropriate data.
It will be exciting.
We'll all be anxiously awaiting that conversation. So, do we have any other visitors or delegations? Yes.
My name's Pam Sauer, and I'm a community member. Since you guys are the board and you are the representatives of the community to the school district and the school district board, I just wanted to let you know that concerned that social emotional learning, the focus on social emotional learning right now, while they understand that it's very important, they are concerned about the social emotional learning component almost being more important than the academic component. And so that perhaps you guys could address that sometime to the community, in, ways that, people would, feel comfortable because, as you know, there's a lot of things going on in the nation, in different places. And sometimes parents might feel like there's a lack of transparency there. So I know, everybody in this room and, the community cares about the kids, they care about the families. And so just wanted to make a comment that you might, be aware or not aware that, there is that concern that it might come off as being a lack of transparency.
Well, we have the perfect agenda then for today because that's what our spotlight is going to be about. And so we'll be able to have some chance to be able to explain some of the things that we do.
Thank you very much.
So,
Yeah, and
Anybody-
I would
yeah?
add to that, back in previous school board meeting archives, I can say within the last 2 years, and if anybody's interested, we can narrow it down and find the exact spot where we've brought forth our pupil services team members by building at a number of different school board meetings and talked very transparently about the content in the delivery of social emotional curriculum and learning activities and so on. I'm also aware of, as long as the topic was brought up, I'm also aware that at a probably more of a national level, I haven't heard about it here, that some conspiracy theorists and those that are looking to incite anger and frustration with schools and others are somehow magically, he said with sarcasm in his voice, connecting social emotional learning in schools to critical race theory, which I don't know how you take that quantum leap, but there's a lot of allegations and mixed messages. And so certainly the more that we can continue to do as we are this evening in telling the facts, our hope is that people pay attention to the facts. And sometimes, as you know, in this day and age, that's a challenge for some.
anybody else? All right. We have some informational items, and the first one is exciting. It's a Wildcat Pride Award.
There we go. We're live now, so. Wildcat Pride Certificate is proudly presented to Heidi Otterness. The Board of Education would like to extend its sincere gratitude and extraordinary quick thinking and call to action for helping save a student from choking. As you provide district leadership and continuing our foundation built on strong character, you displayed compassion, responsibility, perseverance, and courage at a time when a student needed you most. We are thankful and proud of you. You are a true ambassador of Wildcat Pride. Thank you very much.
Well, Heidi, thank you. It's a miraculous thing that you were able to do, and you're.
Background? I didn't hear you.
Oh, well, I'm just going to say that you're in good company because we have a principal who did a very similar thing, very same thing. So why don't you tell us the story?
A student came into my office and he was eating a peanut butter sandwich, like big gobbles, not bites. And I'm a retired EMT. So he coughed hard and it kept getting less and less until there was no air movement. And I was already up with a garbage can and I looked at him and I said, "Are you choking?" And he just looked at me. I did 4 thrusts on him and the sandwich came up. So I just watched it. I'm like, oh, this isn't going to end well because he was just gobbling. And then I called his dad and I'm like, just so you know, your son's ribs might be a bit sore, but at least he was no longer choking. He goes, oh, he chokes all the time. And I'm like, well, I'm glad it's normal for you, but it wasn't normal for me. So, yeah, I just did what I had to do.
That's amazing.
Thank you.
You are serving our students well. Thank you. And now we have the spotlight. So, Mark and your team, if you could come up and talk about mental health and social emotional learning.
All right. Well, the team is a little smaller than I
all right.
initially anticipated.
Well, but the two of you are going to be able to manage just fine, I know.
And Dr. Camerath is going to come up as well. We are in the middle of a bit of a flu season in a couple of our buildings. So there's a couple of people out sick, and then there's swim practice got rearranged. So that took out another individual as well. So we are here to kind of give you a state of the union, so to speak, around social emotional learning and mental health. And hopefully this does speak a little bit to your question as far as kind of what we're doing in the schools and why we're doing it. I think we've got some really good data here to show kind of the importance of this aspect of education and why our students need the supports that we're giving them.
You might have to turn it up.
What? Oh. Thank you. I appreciate that.
It takes a team, Mark.
Exactly. Okay, so what we're going to do today is we're going to go through a little bit of data, and then we're going to have some conversation about what is happening in each of our buildings. So we're going to have a little bit of time to talk about some of the elementary data and the elementary initiatives that we've been doing both this year, some things that are maybe a little bit new, as well as some of the things that we've done over the last handful of years as well. So here to talk a little bit about the elementary data and some of the things that are going on is Dr. Camerath.
There we go. And yeah, I'm representing the counselors and psychs. Amy and I went over this today. We'll do our best to kind of represent all four of the elementaries, but my knowledge obviously lies best with Westside, but I think I can represent it pretty well. So the minute meetings is something that we've been doing for several years. Each year I give the counselors a lot of credit, and psychs as well, as they kind of update the questions and try to adapt with what we need. Last year ours were obviously wrapped a little more around COVID, and whereas this year we've able to move a little bit more past that. So the biggest question we ask in the minute meetings is there a grown-up at school that you can talk to if you have a big problem? And then they show the percentages there, percent of students who answered no. Westside 2.7%, Rocky 5.5%, Greenwood 5.4%, and Montessori 3.3%. That's really good percent of kids in our building. And there are certainly kids, when I look at our list, and some that I suspect from the other buildings too, where they may not understand the question, or we do ask this in the fall. We try to wait a little bit, but newer students, that type of thing. So certainly some of that is explainable, but I know at Westside we're really proud of that, and all the buildings should be. Those numbers are really, really good. Percent of our kids that have an adult they can go to. All others were able to name at least one adult as somebody who does help do those meetings. Some kids can go on and on and on, and I usually stop at about 4 names. I'm like, okay, we're good here. We got this. So we're elementaries are very proud of those numbers. What's happening already at elementary schools? Lunch bunch groups are something that our counselors and many other teachers use to help form connections. Usually they're able to bring a friend or multiple friends, which really helps form connections there at school. One-on-one counseling opportunities, whether it be with a counselor, a psychologist, or a social worker, Rich. And so that is something that, again, can be targeted to those individuals who maybe need more connections, but also are used across the board. Intentional staff connections with each child. So again, that's using that minute meeting data of, hey, these kiddos were identified. We'll either intentionally find connections, or even in the past, we've done like a draft where, all right, who'd like to kind of help and support this kiddo? Make sure that we're getting that individual connection. Encouraging out-of-school connections, so big brothers, big sisters. Something we at Westside have utilized in the past is some connections at the high school. Finding maybe a junior who we could connect with a kid for 1 or 2 years, and that's been a really positive thing. Continued focus on community building, so that universal classroom lessons that our counselor leads and also some psychs are doing that as well. Pride groups, buddy groups, where at lower level, like a K1, 2, or JK will connect with a 3, 4, 5. Usually that's twice a month, and that's a really positive thing. That is one of the things in the minute meetings when we ask in the beginning of the year what kids are looking forward to. It's finding out who their buddy classroom is. We do that in assembly, and I think some others do too, where they announce, hey, this year Mr. Smith will be with Mrs. Cunningham's, and it's fun to see the kids wave across the gym at each other. It's a really exciting announcement kids look forward to. All school character assemblies, I believe that is universal across, and that's a really positive thing too, where different grade levels pick a character trait, and each month or by the month to teach to, and that's really fun to see kids teaching our building. And then character council, which several buildings do, which I believe all across the board is 4th and 5th grade. And it's a really neat thing. Some of the sponsoring of other groups, spirit days, recognizing different groups around the building, like our custodians day we had a couple weeks ago. That was a really positive thing. Additional elementary school supports, co-located mental health services, so Callier Clinic, and that will be starting relatively soon.
Soon in a week or two.
Yeah, and we are really excited for that mental health support to be coming back to our schools. Character Strong curriculum, we are piloting that at Westside along with the middle and high school, and that so far has been a really positive thing. It's like anything, finding time to do it, but it's a really positive resource. We used some of our October in-service day for training and really appreciated it. Additional universal classroom lessons, again, something counselors and psychs at some level are doing as well. Increased pride group time, increasing at some buildings from 30 to 40. So I think we're universal at 40 minutes for pride groups across the board, which is twice a month. Reviewing SABR's social emotional screener. So that is something that we can do through FastBridge. Our new replaced Ames Web is a universal screener at the elementary. And that's something we're looking at doing, which I think would be a positive kind of a screener just to see where kids are at certain levels. Kids do that. I believe it's 4th and up. And then adults complete that as well. And would be a really, go ahead.
Is Pride an acronym for something?
Pride,
Like a lion's pride.
yeah. Yeah, Pride, yeah, it's not an acronym other than a group that sticks together. There you go, like a lion. And then integrated universal reviews of behavior data into regular meetings. So we, using Infinite Campus now feeds into EduClimber, and being able to use that behavioral data, like we used it this morning in our behavior committee meetings, using it in SSTs as well to kind of help behavioral data drive some of those meetings, has been a really positive way to help kind of be more proactive with it as well. I think that's the end of the elementary.
Yeah.
Awesome. Any questions on elementary?
Chris, what's lunch bunch?
Lunch bunch would be where a counselor or another teacher has a couple of kids that come together over lunch, and trying to build some social connections with kids, kids who don't. There's a variety of reasons, and it's a very positive way to build relationships with kids, and whether it's just chatting or it's playing a game together, it can look different ways. So, did my best counselor impression tonight.
Chris, could you give us a couple examples of the topics for the universal classroom lessons, please?
Yeah, some of them are very set curriculum that happen pretty much every year, such as 5th grade does learner resumes. So kids get to learn a little bit more about themselves and kind of how they learn. Are they more a kinesthetic learner? And that's a neat way for, kids to start thinking about who they are as a person instead of, just all the same. And that's a good thing. I know the other day I was watching Mrs. Everson, and she did one at the younger grades about listening. We do one on, it's not the difference between tattling and reporting. And so it's every year she's kind of, and Amy is who I know the best, but every year they're kind of revamping and going through. Some are more set criteria at the younger grades where they have kind of a curriculum built out. They use Kelso, so Kelso's Choice, and go through a wheel of options of how to solve smaller problems and decide what's a larger problem. Coping strategies, yeah. So it's
Kindness lessons.
Yep. Yeah, it's every year the issue that Amy and I talk about is so much content and just not enough lessons and finding that time. But it's really neat to see. And she's a consistent source to counselors where they have them for 6 years, and that's been a positive. And we include them in the JK as well, which is kind of a neat way to build that universally going forward. So, more questions? Awesome. Thank you, guys.
Yeah, and just to give the elementary school even more kudos, you know, those minute meetings sound like, oh, it's a minute. Well, you take that minute, you multiply it by each student they have. The minute meetings generally are at least, 5 to 8 minutes by the time you get them in. You ask them the questions. And so it is a big undertaking, and analyzing the data is a big undertaking as well. And not only does it allow you to kind of identify, the kids that might struggle to make those connections, part of those meetings too is to identify what the kids are interested in. So that also allows you to say, hey, there's Johnny. I know Johnny doesn't have a lot of connections, and I know Johnny loves baseball. So now I can ask Johnny about baseball and develop those connections naturally. So again, really great kudos to the elementary schools for doing those things.
The questions they ask are, what is something you're excited about for the year? What's something you're worried about for the year? And those are really helpful and really telling. There are some that we've gotten. Like personally at Westside, we had 4 that were worried about fire drills. And it allowed us to kind of dig in a little deeper why that, and they were very different reasons, from a bad experience to the sound of the siren. And so some of those were really, really helpful, where many of them, it was just a thing that's coming up next week. What are you most excited about? Well, the Adventure Dash, because it was a week away. So,
Yep.
But it's really helpful, and we do, at least in our office meetings, try to go through it as best you can, going through 410 pieces of data.
Yes. All right, so middle school as well. Now, middle school and high school, we have a unique set of data that we collect called the YRBS, which is the Youth Risk Behavior Survey. This is a survey that it's an anonymous survey. We get parent consent, or we can ask parents if they want to opt out or not. And it really allows us to get a kind of a snapshot of our student population as it relates to a large number of things. Tonight, I've really kind of focused in on connectedness and mental health. So we're going to talk a little bit about our data there. We're going to compare it to some of our neighbors, because we have data from all of Pierce County as well as all of St. Croix County. And then we're going to talk a little bit about kind of what our history of data looks like, and then go into a little bit about what each of our buildings is doing. So just to start off with, here's the 2021 Youth Risk Behavior Survey. Pierce County did 1,415 students. St. Croix County did 1,896. And you can see kind of the reporting schools on there as far as the data sets. And here we get to kind of our overall data. What I did is I kind of loosely coded in green the numbers that were maybe on the better end compared to our Pierce County and St. Croix County neighbors. And then in the red are maybe our numbers that are a little bit on the lower end. So you can see when you look at our numbers, and 679 students at our middle school took this particular survey. And you can see the number of students in Pierce and St. Croix. So a lot of really good questions as it relates to that connectedness and support question. So students who agree or strongly agree that they belong at school, 76% of our students at Meyer Middle said yes to that. Students who have at least one teacher or adult at school to talk to, 66. Students who always or most of the time get the emotional help when needed, 47. And then students who agree or strongly agree that teachers care about them, 73. So again, you can see that, you see a little bit of green there, which is really good. But also when you look at those numbers, again, not maybe as great as we'd like to see, and something that we are continually striving to do better here in River Falls. Mental health and well-being. Again, this kind of speaks to the focus on some of these issues in school. And you heard from kind of what Dr. Kamrath was talking about. This isn't something that we spend 7 hours a day on. This is something that we kind of weave into our curriculum. But again, it's, 2-3 times per month, or, 1 time a week or something like that as far as some of these lessons. But looking at mental health, students at our middle school, during the last 12 months, students reported a significant problem with anxiety, 43%. 20% felt so sad or hopeless almost every day that they stopped doing some normal activities. And that's kind of a definition around kind of depression. So you can see some of the numbers around self-harm and suicide ideation down there as well. So again, even though we're seeing green, a lot of these numbers are really pretty high. And so definitely something that we want to focus on and really work to improve here in River Falls. As far as history, kind of took a little bit of a snapshot of what things looked like in 2018, and then what things look like when we just last assessed students in 2021. Again, we're seeing a little bit of a downward trend, which is good. But again, I think all of us in this room would agree that those numbers are nothing that we would be excited about, especially when you think of those as our community kids. I think a lot of times you see numbers about youth mental health, and you get the kind of the national numbers, and you're like, wow, that's a problem. But when you really sit down and look at these are our kids, and that kind of makes it, I think, a little bit more sobering. So what are we doing about this? We've got Sam Dusick to speak to some of that.
Hi, I'm Sam Dusick. I'm one of the counselors at Meyer Middle School. So these are things that have already been happening at Meyer Middle School in the past years that we're continuing to do to address some of those mental health concerns that we have for our students. We do have a school-based mental health therapist that is at our building on Mondays, and so she's able to see, I think, about 7 kids a week on Mondays. That's nice for families that have trouble getting their kids to like a counseling or therapy appointment outside of school hours. It's still billed through insurance and everything, so it's nice for families to be able to access her that once a week. We have the backpack program and support for basic needs for kids who don't have basic needs at home. We have like a clothing closet, and oftentimes we get, supplies of things that kids need to bring home, like shampoo, conditioner, things like that. We have a lot of mental health supports through our student service team. So we, as a counseling team, we have 3 counselors and our school psychologist. We do a lot of individual counseling with kids and small group counseling. So we run a variety of different groups. More and more in the past few years, we've been doing more anxiety groups. We see those numbers of, 40-some% of our kids struggling with anxiety. So sometimes those kids in targeted small groups working on some of those skills is helpful. We have our therapy dog program. So we have Croy, who's a certified therapy dog, who comes in with Summer Bowers 2 times a week. And he is scheduled for 10-minute appointments with kids, and that's been really fantastic. Last year, we started a new way that we assess students for suicide ideation and self-harm. So that's what that CSSRS and NSSI assessments are. We do that K-12 now. So if kids are talking about suicide or self-harm, we now have a process and protocol that we go through where we're all asking the same sort of questions. And we have a triage of what we do when we find out that information. We continue at the middle school. This is our 4th year with our SEL Connect course. So that's a social emotional learning course that all of our kids take in grades 6 through 8. It's part of their exploratory wheel. So they get it for part of the year. That's about a 7.5-week course. It rotates like with their art and Spanish and Gate to Tech and things like that. So us counselors teach that class. This year we're teaching our own grade level, and that's been really cool because we're able to get to know our kids in a different way and be with kids in our own grade. We also do minute meetings at the middle school where we ask similar questions that the elementary school has asked. So like, what are you looking forward to this year? What are you nervous about? We always end our questions with what's one thing you want your school counselor to know about you? And that's the one that I find I get a lot of information from kids on. We have a partnership with Change to Chill through Alina, and we were able to create a chill zone, and we do a chill week, which is like a mental health awareness week with kids to teach coping skills. We knew for this year we are working with Character Strong as well, so we are doing once a week TA lessons on with Character Strong, and that's character education. It does go really well with social emotional learning too. We've always been doing the character lessons in TA, but now we have a really strong curriculum for what we're doing. We are trying to provide more parent education and resources. The counseling department started a monthly newsletter where we have a mental health spotlight and provide information to parents. This year, we have a wellness club for students that our art teacher is leading, and that's been really cool. We are exploring guest speakers related to mental health for this winter. With the minute meetings, we asked that question about if kids feel like they have a connection with an adult in the building. We tracked as well the kids that said they do not, and we're doing something called a Red Dot program where I bring those names to our staff, and so then teachers say like, oh, I think I can make a connection with that kid, and then we kind of like sign up who is going to try to make connections with those kids who feel like they don't have one of those relationships. We did a fall professional development on the importance of relationships and connections with kids. And we did just get a grant for some updates in one of our rooms in the counseling office where kids can come down and take a break. And we have some sensory fidget items down there. So I think that's additional support this year. Any questions for middle school?
Sam, the Connect classes. So do some students take that the first 7 weeks and then some students, so some students don't have it till the very end of the year, right?
Correct. Yep. So it does, they rotate like through the wheel, so they're not all getting it at once. And that would be then where we are putting some of that stuff through TA and like the mental health awareness week where kids are getting it all the time, because we know some of the kids don't get it then till the end of the year.
So they're getting it
Like pieces, throughout the year, but then that course is really, hyper-focused on like the coping skills and things like that,
Yeah,
so.
my kid was in Connect this
Yeah,
fall, so
yeah,
I got to hear all about it.
Yeah, probably not his favorite class, but, No. Some kids' favorite class, some kids not. It just kind of depends, so, yeah.
All right, so high school. So same deal with high school. They took the Youth Risk Behavior Survey as well. 859 of our high school students participated, about 82% of all the students up there. You can see the numbers for Pierce County and St. Croix County below. So similar questions, similar rollouts as far as kind of what we're seeing there. So students who agree or strongly agree they belong at school, 62%. Students who have one teacher or adult to talk to, 72. Students who most of the time or always get the emotional help when needed, 23. And again, consistent with Pierce and St. Croix. And then students who can turn to at least one adult besides parents, 85. So just a little information right there as far as kind of that school connectiveness and support at our high school. At the same token, mental health. So again, anxiety, 48%. Students who felt so sad or hopeless almost every day for 2 weeks, 30%. Then you can see some of the ideation questions below. So in a similar manner to the middle school, again, some numbers that I think when you think of these being our students, our kids, our grandkids, it's something that definitely warrants some focused work. And I'm really proud of the student services team for what they have been doing and some of the things that we are doing going forward as well. Here's a little bit of just some historical information as far as kind of how those numbers tracked over time. Whenever you see kind of a grayed out box, that just means that the data wasn't reported in that particular data set. So we continue to get this information. We will be doing another YRBS in the spring of this year. It's going to kind of turn into like an every other year kind of thing or every year and a half kind of thing. And so we'll have this ongoing set of data to kind of inform some of our efforts. Much like we do with the Ford exam and looking at kind of how we're doing academically, this is a really good way to kind of take a dipstick on how we're doing with social emotional learning. In general, when you look at kind of both our middle school and high school, we did see, because there is a way you can kind of go in and look at kind of subgroups. And so when we looked at that, we did kind of a deep dive. And really, we saw much higher rates of anxiety and depression for students who really reported that low sense of school belonging. Students who feel like they belong at school, feel connected at school, not surprisingly, have less amounts of anxiety and depression. Students who had experienced bullying, depression, or bullying or violence or trauma, again, also showed more rates of anxiety, depression. Students with low grades, students who had things that, set them apart from their peers, like race or class or sexual orientation or disability status, also were reporting higher levels of those things. And then finally, female students were reporting higher levels of anxiety, depression, and self-harm compared to their male peers. Real quick, as far as things that are happening at the high school, very similar to kind of some of the things that are happening at the middle school. Things that were already happening. High school had the backpack program. They have Wiley's Wardrobe, which is a great room that has lots of clothing and supplies for students who need them. Student services team up there does a lot of mental health supports through groups, through individual or one-on-one counseling. We have character education. We've done some additions as far as student services. I know last year you added another social worker, which really allowed a social worker really to focus on the high school and then have one for the elementary levels. So that was really helpful as far as the high school services as well. This year, as far as additional supports, we expanded our co-located services through a partnership with Restorative. Thank you to the school board and to the Lions Club for a great donation that allowed that to happen. We did do a fall PD on restorative practices. We did an additional fall professional development on the importance of relationships and connections. I actually shared all the numbers I just shared with you with the middle school and high school staff so they could actually see what our current students were reporting as far as their social, emotional, and mental health. Because again, I think it's really important to have a firm understanding of what our students are walking in the door with each and every day. We're starting with Character Strong. The student services team has done a lot of work on the SEL MTSS framework. Because again, if you can be successful academically, that's another protective factor when it comes to some of the mental health pieces. So really, well, I should take a second. Do you have any questions about high school? Okay. Fantastic. I was just going to ask Kit anyway, so. All right. So really, to wrap things up, on behalf of the Student Services team, I just want to thank the school board, Superintendent Benson, Mr. Bell, for all of the support for Student Services positions and initiatives over the last several years. You can see that our students definitely need it, and you can see that a lot of really, really great work is happening. So I just, again, thank you for your ongoing support, and hopefully this was a helpful snapshot of what's happening in our schools.
Thanks, Mark. One of the things that I notice on here is when we talk about personalizing learning and serving the whole child, it seems to me that it would be pretty difficult to be able to separate out students' social and emotional needs from their academic needs. Am I thinking about that in an accurate way?
Correct.
Okay. Alan?
Couple of things. Thanks, Mark and staff, for this. This is interesting stuff, and as Jamie mentioned, we've been getting updates on this throughout the pandemic. In fact, the pandemic was a real catalyst for us to really focus on this. One of my things that I've really come to understand much better in my time on the board is that all kids need to learn, and anybody who's listened to me on my time on the board here knows that I'm constantly hammering about charter schools, if you count the e-school, which we do. In this, we've got a lot of variety so that families can make these decisions and that. One of the things that I've had to remind myself of on the board was when my kids were going through the district, I had to always remind myself that their experience wasn't always the experience of everybody else. So why are we doing this? My kids don't need that, okay? Then to stop and think that as board members, we're not here because they're my kids, we're here because they're our kids. We have 3,500 kids in this district, and they're our kids. And we need to be concerned and focused on all of them. So if things are getting in the way, we need to make sure that we're knocking those down and addressing that and keeping everybody going. Now, this isn't as if we just decided that, boy, we're worried about social and emotional learning, and so we're going to focus on the self-harm thing, and we're not going to teach reading first semester. We're just going to focus on self-harm, okay? We don't do things like that. There are absurdities out there. I know being on the WASB Executive Committee now and looking at the other 320 school boards, school districts in the state, there are absurdities here and there are people around going on in some districts thinking that, see, this is going on in that district, it's probably going on in your district too. This is a good district. It's an above average district, so I don't like to see us when we're up there as being average, even average. Below average, nothing. I don't like to see us below average in anything because we consider ourselves an above average district on this. So we ought to be doing better than most of these others. But we're not doing some of this absurd stuff, and we are concerned about families. We're concerned about, to the extent that they exist for a student or a family unit, as I often call it, because too many of our students don't have a traditional family to support them and those kinds of things, and we need to watch for them. And the fact that many of the issues you raised here, even though they only affect a small number of students, I'm real concerned about that those thoughts of suicide thing, which 1 out of 5 of our students in the middle and high school are have thought about suicide, okay? Now, that's 1 out of 5, but that 1 out of 5 affects the other 4 out of 5. There's no way that thinking and actions that happen in that 1 out of 5 don't affect the 4 out of 5. So it gets in the way of everybody's learning, right? So being focused on this in partnership with what we're doing in teaching in our academic pursuits and those kinds of things is what's going to make our students succeed, get good test scores, master content things, and that sort of thing. So I apologize for the long speech here, but it's a long way of saying appreciate what the staff is doing here to do this. Appreciate the fact that you've been able to quantify this and put this out there and open it up for people to ask questions about and those kinds of things, because it's absolutely important work and it's critical foundation work to our students learning and mastering the basics and foundations of what we're here for. Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Alan. You summarized it well. Anything else? All right, we are going to move on to some reports. And the first one, really our focus today is the superintendent's report.
Yeah, we're doing our presentation tonight jointly, so the administrative team is going to provide the school board with a strategic plan update. We call it our 90-day update, as we have made that commitment to the board. After you, the board, approved a new strategic plan, it's a 5-year plan. You approved it in June 2022 through 2027, makes that 5-year plan a 5-year plan. And so we need to kind of break this into some pieces and make sure that our work is deliberate and purposeful and focused and targeted, and not find ourselves trying to bite off more than we can chew all at one time. Again, it's a 5-year plan, not a 1-year plan. And so what we did with the entire strategic plan is identified 3 primary areas that we were going to work on with our staff this year. There's some other pieces to the strategic plan that I'll also outline. I had to one-up the administrative team because we promised each other that we would not bring a PowerPoint. Otherwise, this presentation, had each principal brought a PowerPoint tonight, the meeting would go until midnight. And so we're gonna give the board a brief overview, but of course I had to one-up them. And so I just have a couple of brief slides sharing our mission statement, and there's copies of our strategic plan on the table over here where you can read more in depth about that plan the board approved in June.
So nobody but the superintendent can bring a PowerPoint. That's the message.
That's right.
Okay.
That's right. Yeah, one of those deals. So here I highlighted the 3 green pieces are those 3 selected areas of the strategic plan that we felt our staff would need to be a little more engaged in these 3 areas. And I'm going to talk shortly about some other areas of the strategic plan that are in motion, but it doesn't require the attention and the energy of all of our staff as much as those 3 green ones that our principals are going to just talk about the one underneath goal 1 tonight. And then next month, they're gonna talk about 2.2, and the following month, they're gonna talk about 3.3. We found in our rehearsal, our dress rehearsal, that again, if we were to give you a comprehensive report on all three, frankly, it would have just taken too long, and we think we can be more efficient and a little more detailed if we break it into pieces. Sorry.
Apparently you don't get a PowerPoint.
Yeah, he got dropped by the, sorry.
That's okay. I clicked twice, and I'm the one that caused that little hiccup. And so now I will refer to my cheat sheet to remind me of a couple of comments that I wanted to share with the board before I turn it over to the board. Again, copies of the strategic plan are available here. I mentioned we identified the three objectives that would be more intensely focused on some work with our staff. And again, we didn't want to create initiative fatigue, work overload. We also wanted to keep our focus a little more narrow and really laser-like focused on these key priorities. We think that's a way to be more productive and overall more effective, again, within a 5-year plan. Don't try to do it all at once. There is, however, more than meets the eye with our strategic work, and so I'm just gonna briefly share some of what that entails. And all of these that I'll just mention briefly are found within the, one at a time. I'm on the bottom part of this slide now. All of these components under more than meets the eye, that is to say, more than just those three priorities. Here's an example of more than just those three that are grounded in our strategic plan, that are going on, I'll say, kind of a little more behind the scenes and don't require the time and attention of our staff on a daily or weekly basis. We recently completed a formal safety and security audit at both the high school and the middle school, that helped us to identify areas to improve our safety security measures. There's college and career planning that was presented to the board at our last meeting, or was that ed program perhaps? The addition of mental health supports, you heard about that tonight. In-service plans are very focused on removing barriers to learning for all of our students, and some work that we've done to improve staff wellness. All of those little miscellaneous pieces are also called for within the strategic plan. And without getting into the weeds on all the details with that, the intent of tonight is now for me just to turn it over to the administrative team so that they can give you some more in-depth details regarding, okay, so what's going on at each building? What of that goal 1.1, support collaborative teaching culture focused on student learning, what are you doing at each of your buildings? And so with that, I will turn it over first. Kit, are you first on the list? Following our board agenda, Mr. Litke will provide the board with a little update of these activities at the high school.
A lot of what we've talked about, I think we've been in front of you as the board the last 2 months, so I'll be brief. Really, again, I'm not sure if Jamie's planning on sharing the spreadsheet with you that we have where we're kind of documenting some of the things that we're doing, but we talked, Lisa and Terrell talked in September about some of the professional development we're doing with 9th and 10th grade teachers, specifically talking about some of our students of concern, trying to find ways to improve levels of academic or different behaviors in that level. We've also talked with you about our academic and career planning. We had Melissa Hanson here discussing as well, showing you our comprehensive model of what we're trying to roll out with all students. Our SLO goal is, again, has been remaining the same it's a 3-year goal, that we again increase the number of our students by 30% in terms of college and career readiness. And we've shared that redefining ready data with you. So we are really highlighting and working on that work. Behind that, though, we have our PLC meetings. So we, again, are looking at our curriculum and how it is aligning
to things like our ACT, how it is aligning to levels of our curriculum and how we are preparing for students in terms of college and career readiness. But I feel like out of all of us back here, you see me most often, and you kind of know where we're headed in our objectives and how we're treating our staff. Again, the Fruity Pebbles calendar, we meet often. We talk a lot with our teams about it. If I'm advocating for one thing again tonight, would be consistent PLC time, more so at the high school if we could ever find a way to get that work moving a little bit forward and faster. So thank you so much.
I'm going to jump in before you, Chris, because with the hiccup that I had with the PowerPoint presentation, I mistakenly forgot to mention another two really important pieces. One really important piece of the strategic plan is broadly this long-range facility plan, and I think I would be remiss to not continue to trickle some of this information out publicly. And as time goes on, we're going to have more conversation moving forward. But the board approved, the board hired a company to do a formal enrollment study. That will help us to identify our space needs, the number of classrooms needed, and so on. Educational adequacy, what kind of changes have occurred within education that maybe we need to take a deeper look at our space, not just in terms of enrollment, but also educational adequacy. What are some of the community interests, transportation needs, school forest, co-curriculars? All of those things will be part of, as the strategic plan calls for us to do, the development of a long-range facility plan. The second asterisk note, the second paragraph, I'm mentioning the potential for a 2024 referendum based on this facility plan and based on the enrollment study. And I purposefully wanted to state here that obviously to move forward with any referendum, it's a community choice issue. Referendums mean that the community gets to decide what we're going to do. And if you're going to conduct a referendum correctly, you have to have the right kind of engagement and dialogue and communication with the community so that they can make a well-informed decision when they go to vote, yes or no. And we are very firm in our understanding of that and are very committed to that, and just wanted to mention that if we continue on a path towards a 2024 referendum, we're going to take this facility study, we're going to take the enrollment study, and we're going to engage in making prioritization from all of that work. And together, we'll then engage with the community and decide whether or not we're going to hold a referendum in 2024 or not. Now, Chris, back to you.
When Jamie told me that I couldn't do a PowerPoint, I thought about writing a song for this 1.1. My voice is a little scratchy tonight, so I think I'll take a pass on that. So yeah, just a couple notes on our priorities as they relate to the strategic plan. We have a lot of open enrolled students in our program this year. So one of the things we are attempting to do is find out where they are in their reading and mathematics skills, and as they come into our program so that we can target some interventions for those students who may be struggling. We haven't had a good I don't think we've had a really good assessment. We're going to work with the FastBridge assessment this year. So that's something new for us, so we can identify those struggling readers and those who might need a little extra math help as they progress through our program. Another thing that we've been doing is aligning our core courses with the high school in terms of, one would be just course titles. So if they take a course at our school or the high school, because we have movement between the two schools, that they're getting the same content. We're looking at the same benchmarks, standards, assessments, working with the high schools so we can ensure some rigor and also some integrity, if a student is moving back and forth or moving into our program or out of our program. So we're excited about that. We're implementing a mentoring program this year for first-generation college students and working with UWRF to kind of charge up our students a little bit about life after Renaissance. So that is something that we're excited about. The other thing as it relates to collaborating and keeping our focus on students is looking at our graduation profile this year, kind of outlining specific qualities and skills that we would like our graduates to have, and then assessing how we're doing in terms of helping those students get to that point. Specific things that we're looking at as career and life skills, we've always done that, but we feel that we can continue to do that. Sense of purpose, sense of self, leadership, empathy, collaboration skills, creativity, and of course, content knowledge are all things we're looking at when we're looking at a profile of a Renaissance graduate. So that's kind of what we're doing at the Renaissance.
And next time, I'd prefer you'd sing it, Chris. I think it would come off even better.
Mark at Meyer Middle School.
All right. I would start off by saying that 1.1 is, I guess, looking at from a personal perspective. When I look back on my mission as an educator for 15 years, my mission was to inspire, encourage, and challenge others to reach their potential through hard work and character. Nowhere in my mission did it say anything about student learning. And then I read a book by Anthony Muhammad and Luis Cruz, and then we read Learning by Doing as an admin team. And one of the first chapters in Learning by Doing was, what is your mission as a building? And we spent 6 months coming up with our mission that's memorable. It came down to 3 things: that we're collectively committed to the academic growth, character development, and well-being of every student every day. And then our vision is that we'll operate as a high-performing professional learning community in a caring environment where students and staff feel safe, connected, and engaged. And the secret sauce, as Jamie likes to say, is a professional learning community when it comes to 1.1. So that was a lot of our work last year. This year, we're collaboratively meeting once a week on Tuesdays. We've been able to take the team prep and prep time so our grade level teams can meet every week. And the bulk of our work is right now centered around standards-based grading. So when you look at the big 4 questions within a PLC, what do you want kids to know? How do you know if they know it? What do you do if they do know it? What do you do if they don't know it? We're really focusing right now on the standards-based part of it, and we're working really hard on our proficiency scales and our assessments. So we're continuing to do that book read as well with our staff, Learning by Doing. We're once a month getting into our team meetings for that. So that's the bulk of our work right now. And I would say that our admin team also did that book read last year. And the last part is, and I stole this out of Dr. Sherman's playbook, is, listen, you can have a mission and you can have collective commitments, but if you're not reflecting on those periodically, so this past quarter, at the end of the first quarter, we went and looked at our collective commitments, and we talked about what are our successes, what can we celebrate, what do we need to start doing, and what do we need to stop doing. We'll be doing that same process later this year. So that's one of the nice parts is our admin team's doing the book read, we're learning from each other. So that's what's going on at Meyer Middle School.
Mark, who's the author of that book? Who wrote that?
DeFore, Ekers, I can't remember. Nate, is that right? Yep, DeFore and Ekers.
Mark, just a comment on that. Kit's not here, so I'll say this in context. I'll say it to you in context of the data that Mark just presented on the middle school and high school, which is really useful data. But you've already got a big plate full on the stuff that you're undertaking right now, especially that focus on student mastery of material and all that sort of stuff. We'll be interested, I think, going forward on how we incorporate the stuff Mark has talked to us about, where students are in their life and how that gets incorporated into that learning stuff and hearing about that, because I think that's important to all of us right now. It's concerning data, what we do with that, I think is going to be important for us, so.
Dr. Sherman.
Okay, so in regarding Objective 1.1, supporting a collaborative teaching culture focused on student learning, it really is in the wheelhouse of some pretty important work we've done at Greenwood for quite a few years now. Our 3 cornerstones are character, culture, and collaboration, and you can see 2 of those in this objective. So I could carry on for a long time and get pretty fired up and passionate about the work that we're doing, but I'll just pull a few things out from what's been going on at Greenwood. A couple things that have been happening. First, just a little backdrop. A few years ago, actually quite a few years ago now, we instituted a performance character rubric that we use in our classrooms with our students to try and capitalize on the character work that we do, but apply it to the academic work in the classroom, focusing on character traits of perseverance, responsibility, cooperation, and courage. So it's a way for teachers to sit down with kids and essentially analyze the academic work. Are you doing your very best? Are you sticking with the work when it's hard for you? Can you work with other people well? Obviously important skills for the 21st century. So that's something I wanted to point out. Collaboration has been a big part of our work at Greenwood also for many years, and we talk about having authentic collaboration, and a lot of times that gets lost underneath the language of PLC. So being a professional learning community means that part of your culture is that your ongoing collaboration is happening. What Mr. Litke was talking about was trying to find time in his schedule where the teachers can get together regularly, that's embedded in the day, to talk about student learning first, and then figure out how their teaching can address the student learning, and then continue that cycle. So at Greenwood, we talk about collaborating in a way that is both tight and loose. So we want to make sure, A, that we're tight on having a guaranteed and viable curriculum. And that doesn't mean that we have this nice scope and sequence that looks really pretty, but rather that we can implement the curriculum that's in front of us. And I think you know, probably having been in education as long as many of you have been, that there are many, many, many standards, far too many for us to teach and address during the course of a child's K-12 education career. So guaranteed and viable. Another element that's tight is to have common formative assessments or performance tasks, making sure that we're checking for student learning along the process of the learning, not waiting until the unit is over, but rather throughout the process. Another area that is tight is making sure that we have interventions and extensions for our kids, that when we get to those third and fourth questions that Mr. Chapin talked about earlier, how do we know if they know it? What do we do if they do? What do we do if they don't? We have a plan in place to address those needs. If they're not getting it, how do we help them? If they are getting it, let's not bore them, but let's look at ways to enrich the learning opportunities. So those things are tight. Things on the loose side of collaboration might be the norms that the teams make, the roles that they play in their collaboration, how they write their common formative assessments, and how they score those things. That's dependent upon their team, and they're working together to do that, but that's changing throughout the course of their meetings. And then this year, because we've been at this for a while, but it's important that we all know that you've never really arrived as a collaborative unit. It's something you have to continue to focus on, continue to grow in, and be reminded of. So I've asked the staff this year, after each collaboration meeting, ask yourself these questions. Did the work that we did today impact student learning? Did the work that we did today impact my teaching? And did we answer those 4 questions? If that happened during the course of a collaborative meeting, then that was authentic, and the impact would be powerful. At Greenwood this year, something that's new is we're working on our vision statement. So Mark talked about his mission and his value statements. We've had those for many years, but we're putting a vision statement in. And I was doing some reading this year, and a phrase that I ran across was, without action, vision is only a dream, and action without vision just passes the time. But vision with action can change the world. So we're working on putting our vision together, which is a realistic and viable look at the future. What do we want to become? When we think down the line, what do we want to see for Greenwood Elementary? And we've had a lot of success at Greenwood over the last handful of years. And I say that with a lot of humility, but we have, and we don't want to wait until things turn in the opposite direction. And visioning is a proactive approach to moving schools forward. It should energize and excite people, and we've had some great collaboration involving all staff, not just teaching staff, but support staff as well throughout the course of the year. So the vision was the big new part for us at Greenwood. And then I also wanted to talk outside of Greenwood, just at the elementary level, and my colleagues can jump in. We emailed back and forth, who should do this tonight? So I'll just jump in on it. Something we've been working hard on together is to get our music, art, phy-ed, and our special educators together on a more authentic collaborative path also. So they've been meeting over the course of time, probably once a month, but the nature of their meetings hasn't been as focused as what we would like to see it be. So we have been meeting with those people over the last couple of months, preparing them to engage in authentic collaboration And that will start December 1st. So we'll bring teams together. We'll have them spread out at different buildings across the district. 2 of those groups will be at Greenwood, a couple will be at Westside, a couple will be at Rocky, a couple will be at the Montessori, and they'll be in the same places that everyone else is collaborating, and that way we can best support them as they're engaging in that work. So we've been teaching them, how do you identify your essential targets? How do you build your common formative assessments? What are your team norms going to be? What do high expectations look like in your content area? So we're really, really excited about the work that we're getting going on with our specialists. We haven't forgotten about them, but while we've all been getting together on what authentic collaboration is with our regular education teachers, we had to put something on the back burner until now, and we're ready to move forward with that. So those are the things I wanted to share with you tonight.
I want to make an observation. We've heard a lot of, in some sense, examples of the fruits of the labor in these presentations about what can come out of collaborative teaching. But I really appreciated the last comments that you made in terms of the process of helping teachers to become collaborators. My guess is teachers, just like everybody else, aren't just naturally born knowing how to do all of these things. So we have to help them to learn. So I appreciate that you gave us an insight into how you're doing that and how you and the other principals will do that.
Yeah, I appreciate
good.
that. I appreciate that comment. You know, it's really hard when you take time that teachers are used to having for themselves, that they have great value in and they want to protect, and you say, well, we're going to use that time for something different. So once the fruits of the labor start showing up, teachers won't want to do without that. But initially, making that switch in mindset is difficult. So there will be some growing pains with our specialists, I'm sure, but I know that we can get there.
But that's where the leaders come in.
Nate, I'm curious about bringing the different specialist areas together. Tell me a little bit about the goal of that. I'm curious. Right, I can see the value of the PLCs and all of that communication. I'm just curious about the different areas coming together.
It would be the same thing as what we would have for any grade level or any content at the middle school or high school. So our music teachers will be getting together. The music teacher from...
With music. PE.
Our-
I
Yep,
thought you were
yep.
crossing the music. That makes...
No, we've brought all of them together now in large group to teach them about collaboration, but yes, I didn't make that clear.
No,
Yep.
I thought you were bringing the music teachers and the PE teachers together. We had a dance unit that I really miserably failed in elementary school, and so I was curious if... Anyways, I'm caught up with you now. Forget it, Mark.
Very good.
Just keep going, Nate.
Very good.
But you know, picking up on that, there's no end of stuff we could do, and I think finding the time, and we've heard this several times from you now tonight, finding the time to get our teachers together without pulling them away from the students and all that sort of thing is a challenge, and it's something we need to grapple with, and we're going to need your help trying to figure that out. Because I would add on top of that, a variation of what Cindy's saying here, I would not only like to see like all the PE teachers in the elementary schools meeting together. Again, I'm real interested in vertical alignment. So do we ever involve the middle school PE teachers and then the high school PE teachers? Because what is it we're doing with music, art, and PE and the elementary level that prepares them for middle school, that prepares them for high school? And without the vertical alignment in our curriculum, we have challenges. Another thing to think about, but it may be something that we can build in at some point, and you'll have to help us as we struggle with this, trying to figure out how to carve out that time. Thanks.
Jamie's not going to introduce me, but
I'm sorry. I was writing a note. Ashley Biggenheimer.
Yeah, from Rocky Branch. One note too on what Nate was saying is the other nice thing about the specialist and special ed collaboration is it also goes with Objective 3.1. So Rocky has a new music teacher and a new special education teacher. So it's just been nice to have them have a different group of people that they can collaborate with that maybe understand their craft a little bit more too. So kind of plays on both areas for that. So I was in a unique position this year being new to Rocky Branch. So my first objective over the summer, I worked with our lit coach to kind of create like a big picture plan for every Thursday for the school year. So we took a calendar, we mapped out every Thursday with the goal of going really slow at the beginning. So obviously Rocky has experience with collaboration and some PLCs, but a new administrator. So we took probably the first 2 months to just talk about guiding documents, roles, norms, what would our like process look like each Thursday? What will it feel like? what are some examples of student work you might bring? And then our lit coach helped me, and so did our math coach, kind of pick out suggested data points throughout the year. So every Thursday, we have a suggestion of what they could bring, a type of student work to look at. But if they're really on a roll with something else, that's fine too, and they can bring the work that's relevant. So we started with a map, started slow with our laying the groundwork, and then we're also doing the Learning by Doing book study for just our BLT. So our leadership team does that. And I'm choosing chapters or excerpts that specifically tie into what's coming next in our Thursday morning meetings. So right now we're kind of shifting into formative assessment conversations and building common formative assessments. So we are working on chapter 6 in the book to tie in with that. And then the BLT members facilitate their PLC collaborative meetings. So sometimes we take time to create protocols or specific questions that align with things that they can bring, and it helps them guide the conversation with their team. So if they're not comfortable with maybe having it really data focused or how to keep the conversation student centered, our BLT team builds some of those guides together to make sure that everyone feels like their conversations are intentional. And then our lit coach and I kind of bounce between the meetings and check in with everyone and help guide the conversation on Thursdays as well. So that's kind of our PLC work, our collaborative meeting work. We also are instructional coaches. We have Connie and Rachel. They're doing instructional walkthroughs, which has been really great. So the last couple of weeks they've popped into classrooms. And it's a time for them to give real-time feedback to teachers. So they're collaborating, they're jumping into some of their lessons, and they're giving them just really quick feedback or pointers on what they saw in their lessons. And then the other piece that we're working on that's related to our collaborative teaching culture is encouraging peer observations. So the coaches and I are going to provide 1 week in December, 1 week in January, and 1 week in February where we're going to offer 30 minutes of coverage so the teacher can go observe another teacher either on their team or in the grade level above or below. So that's kind of coming. They don't know that yet, so if you're watching. But we'll talk about that later this month. So just another opportunity for them. That's all I have.
Good. Thank you, Ashley. That's interesting.
I think you're safe.
Yeah, okay, yeah. Yeah.
It's Chris
Hello.
at Westside.
Chris, thank you, Stacy, for that.
Dr. Camrath.
Westside Elementary.
Ashley got more gusts, do I? All right. I will continue the trend in that we are working hard at Westside on collaboration. We are also our BLT reading portions of the Learning by Doing book. We read chapters 1 and 2, and I just kind of stopped there for now because we are working on a new mission at Westside. The mission there, we believe, was last written in 2010, and although a very thick mission statement, it is not one that I've met a person yet who could memorize or really utilize in various ways. And so we are working on rewriting one, writing a completely new one right now. Our BLT kind of went through stage 2 of that, and I worked a lot with Mark on the process they went through last year. And so we've kind of narrowed down the components and the values that we want as part of it. And now different groups, grade level groups and departments around our building are writing drafts that we'll go through. We've kind of coded the top components that came out now, and they're working on that. And it was helpful to do chapters 1 and 2 first that talk about the mission statement, and then we'll move into vision and into the collective commitment. So that's been a really helpful process, and we hope to utilize that in many things. We hope to utilize interview questions based on that as we bring people into our building. Hope to share that with parents and staff, and or parents and students in addition to our staff, and really use that as a way to drive what we're doing as a building, as the others do as well. Also, we have the collaborations on Thursday morning. What we're doing this year is we have a schedule of our lit coach and I work through those. That is kind of a little bit of pause at times as we utilize Thursday mornings to work with specialists as well, which has been a really awesome process. So far, gotten really good feedback from the specialists on that. So when Jeannie and I go into the PLCs, we're working with them and kind of reviewing or working through what they have, but also ways that we can help and support them. And that's been really helpful for Jeannie and I both to aspects and ways we can do, and also working through the questions and kind of what's next for those groups. We also, our data digs are continuing to work through those. Something we've added new this year is outside of the data digs, which are 3 times a year. We generally try to utilize in-service days so we can for those. Are having meetings with our lit coach, myself, and our school psych to go through the progress monitoring data of interventions every month and how those students are doing, and then work with them to kind of collaborate with our title teacher, the classroom teacher, on how those students are doing if they need adjustments. We're also using EduClimber and those and the data, behavioral data, to kind of drive SST or student support meetings and kind of drive the collaboration, protect teachers from themselves a little bit if the kids have gotten so many roadmaps of like, oh, let's collaborate around those. So kind of using the data to drive smaller forms of collaboration. Something we've also done this year is in our staff meetings, which are twice a month at Westside, is to have specific schedules out in advance of what is being presented on. And so that has helped to bring others into those meetings. So like support staff, they know the topic a month in advance. And if they'd like to come and learn, we have a CPI being presented on and kind of the non-physical aspect of that next month by Joe Hames, our school psychologist. They can come and attend that. Last week, we had one with our lit coach who presented on various strategies. And so people could come to that. And so it's kind of a way to get ahead of that and get more staff involved beyond just our teachers who will always come to those. And I think that is all of them. And then again, just the work with the specialists has been really positive. I have met part of our cycle, our lit coach does not come, but is meeting with our building specialists. So kind of as you were alluding to, Cindy, we meet with music, art, Fayed, library, Spanish within our building once a month or about once every 5-6 weeks. And that's been really positive. But getting them in their own groups outside of the building has been a really good thing. Working to build somewhat where they do the same unit at the same time. And that's something they haven't always done, where they can kind of collaborate around that and kind of brainstorm and just talk through it. I think I'll take that to a whole new level of collaboration they have. So any questions for Westside? Awesome. Thank you.
Nate Wells, Montessori. Being last is a curse and a blessing. The curse is that I have to follow up all the great stuff people have said, but the blessing is the less I say, the more happy you'll be. So collaborative teaching culture. John Hattie, who was big in education, talks about teacher efficacy, which is a teacher's understanding of what they can accomplish themselves and together. And so if we're going to do anything for our students, that's one of the best things we can do, and that's what the collaborative teaching culture is about. I am grateful to have all these people go before me. A lot of great things were said. I think naming the fact again that a lot of the things that we do are built upon previous practices and things we put in place. And so the challenge in tonight is to highlight the new things. And we'd strive to not have too many new things, because too many new things can drown out and make being a teacher really rough if you're always doing these new things. So one new thing that we're doing this year is pre-COVID, part of our collaborative teaching processes in regards to curriculum. Because we have our Montessori curriculum, we had to take time to align and align our Montessori stuff to Common Core standards. And so about 7 years ago, we did a math gap analysis, looking for alignment. Right before COVID, we started looking at ELA, and we ended up looking at writing. And so we're actually picking up work that we started pre-COVID, where we're going to be looking at our writing rubrics, looking at them in terms of Common Core state standards and what themes are supposed to be doing. And then we'll be rolling those into our collaborative meetings on Thursday morning, looking at student writing, and then kind of a process to implement a scope and sequence and have a common assessment tool. So that's one of the big things that we're doing this year. Any questions?
Thank you, Nate. Well, clearly there's a lot of work going on, and that was only one of the sections, so well done. At this point, we're going to move on to number 6, which will be the action items. We have Minutes from the regular Board of Education meeting that was on October 17th. We have bills that have been submitted for payment. We also have employment recommendations. So at this point, do we have a motion to approve minutes, bills, and employment as presented?
So moved.
Thank you, Cindy. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Bob. Any discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? The motion is carried. All right, the Personnel Committee met on November 7th, and at that point, we actually went through several job descriptions that we had talked about previously. So at this point, we have those before us to approve. But in the discussion, we also talked about certified staff ratios, and we had a presentation from the College and Career Readiness Coordinator that talked about the job description, but also later on in that day, we talked about what they actually do. So at this point, do we have a motion to approve the Director of Finance and Facilities Management job description?
So moved.
Second.
Thank you, Bob. Thank you, Alan. Any questions or comments? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? The motion is carried. And now, do we have a motion to approve the superintendent job description?
So moved.
Second.
Mike, did you move? Yes. Okay. And Alan, you seconded. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The motion is carried. And finally, do we have a motion to approve the College and Career Readiness Coordinator and Secretary job descriptions?
So moved.
Thank you, Alan. Is there a second? Thank you, Mike. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The motion is carried, and I'll turn to you.
Stacy, just.
Yes.
When, we did that pretty quickly, but there's a lot of work that went into those 3 rewrites. And I want to acknowledge that there was a lot of good work and a lot of good conversation that went on around those, so. Anyway.
And we had some of that at the last board meeting, too.
Right,
So people have been able to see that. So Alan, I'll turn to you for the education program update and recommendations.
We had a really good meeting. They're always really good, right? This one was a highlight because our primary business item was hearing from Melissa Hansen and her team about our academic and career planning and the redefining, what they called the redefining ready data presentation. And we've heard from Melissa and her team several times in recent years as to what they're doing, and they're doing even more. But this, the fact that our high school is one of about, I think she said 40, some out of over 420 school districts in the state who have a program that is this involved and this far along in terms of what we're doing, in terms of not just preparing students for four-year colleges, but preparing them with the academic and skills readiness for all kinds of careers. And we involve them in technical programs, academic programs, a whole variety of those and how those tie together. It's a very robust and good conversation, and we really appreciate Melissa's work in this, her leadership in this, because it's not just her. She's got a whole team that are involved in this, and we appreciate this at the high school. So that was one. No action was required on that. And then we addressed a policy. One of the things, let me digress for just a second here, because I had a very extended conversation last Friday with a school board member in another school district because of my position now in WASB. Sometimes I'll get some questions from other board members. And this was a board member, and the board was looking at a whole array of policies that they have, and they all need to be updated. They haven't touched anything in almost 8 years. And so now it's kind of this overwhelming task. And it brought back to me the fact that I really appreciate the fact that we have a regular process now of reviewing policies. So if anybody wonders who's maybe watching this or here tonight, why sometimes a policy pops up, it's not just because we all of a sudden realized in a panic we had to do something. It's often because we're doing a regular review. Job descriptions, same kind of thing. We're not waiting until it's an emergency or something. We're trying to do these on a more regular planned basis. But this particular one was one where we did need a policy, and we talked about it in committee. Jamie and I had talked a little bit about leading into the committee, and this was just we need a policy and procedure around when police want to interview our students in the high school. How do we do that? We don't necessarily want to, we certainly don't want to impede the police in some kind of an investigation, but to what degree do parents need to be involved, and how do they alert us, and can they pull a kid out of class in the middle of the day, a kid who they just want to question, but everybody in class realized the police just showed up in the building and pulled them out. What does that do for a building? So we need a policy on how this is going to handle. So Jamie did most of the work on this and consulted our local police, chief of police and the police department and our SROs and all of that. Ran it by legal counsel, all of that. So we now have a policy and procedures in place for this. And we talked about this at length at the committee. That was an actionable item. So I will move that we approve as a full board policy 448 on police interview of students, and 448, the rules that accompany that.
Is there okay. We also want to say that that policy outlines how we will be protecting our students too.
Exactly.
When their parents aren't there. Okay. Any other discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The motion is carried.
And then we also had two new course offerings that Kit brought to us. One is a PE course, Mindful Movement and Aerobic Fitness, and another was a culinary arts course, International Culinary Arts. We had a good discussion about this, the way in which they're going to be taught, the fact that these will be possibly replacing some other courses in the curriculum, not just add-ons, who might be taking these, and where this might, how this would benefit our students. So, good discussion. Appreciate Kit and the teachers involved in this, bringing it forward and responding to our questions. So, I will move that we, as a full board, approve the two courses as presented, Mindful Movement and Aerobic Fitness and International Culinary Arts.
Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Bob. Any discussion? I want to point out that throughout the agenda, you've seen an asterisk pop up here and there. That asterisk is designating any issue that directly ties to our strategic plan. So you'll be able to see that the actions that we are doing are in keeping with the strategic planning that we've done.
The only other thing I'll say about our committee meeting is we won't have a committee meeting in December.
Correct.
Next one will be in January. So.
All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? The motion is carried, and
Was that in favor of not having a?
Yes, and yes.
That was giving Mike off December, yeah.
Dave, I'm going to turn to you to talk with us about the substitute teacher daily rate of pay, please.
So I submitted a memo to the board and to Jamie requesting that we increase the rate of pay for our short-term substitutes from $160 per day to $200 per day for the remainder of this year. This is something that we did last year, and that was a temporary change. The recommendation that I would make is that this would become a permanent change. And there's two important factors why we're looking at this. The first is we have a persistent need. So last year we made this adjustment because of a surge in absences related to COVID. And while the impact of COVID has subsided, the need for substitute teachers has not. Over the last 2 months, we continue to see an increase in the rate of our absences for teachers. And this says because we have more teacher absences, we have more unfilled positions. For context, I provide some data there. Our teacher absences for all or part of the day for the first couple months of the year were at 729. If you go to 2019, which is a few years ago, it was 484. So we're seeing a big increase. A couple qualifiers I want to make sure people understand is that's all or part of a day. So that's counting a teacher that's gone for the entire day, the same as teacher who's maybe gone for just a portion of the day. Maybe they have an appointment, so they're gone for the last half hour. So that's an important thing, and I don't have the breakdown of that, but I think that's important to note. The other piece is, even though we've seen a big increase, the vast majority of our teachers are here every day. Even with this increase, we're seeing our percent absent rate with all or part of the days at about 6%. So again, while that's an increase, it's still the vast majority of teachers are here. So with the increase in absences, our fill rate has remained about the same, so we're seeing more unfilled positions. We've worked really hard to increase the depth of our sub pool. We have about 85 different people who have subbed at least once in the district this year, either as a teacher or a paraprofessional, and that's a nice increase, but we're still not meeting that need. And one thing that's tricky is we're having people who sub in multiple districts, and if our rate of pay isn't
on par with some of our competitors. That's a decision that they're going to make when they decide where to sub. For the most part, the culture of our buildings is a really positive thing. I hear that a lot from our subs. Is I really like to sub in River Falls. The sub plans are really good from the subs. We have strong teams in place. Principals are supportive, and so that's really good. But we have to stay competitive. So I provided some context of the daily rates of pay, and I would like to see that increase to be in line with some of our closest competitors. So that's the recommendation, to increase the teacher sub pay to 200. An important thing that I want to note is we also have a support staff fill rate issue, and that need is still there. But one thing we did at the beginning of this year is we aligned all of our support staff sub rates with our initial step, and so we are sort of top in the area for all of our sub rates for like sped paraprofessionals, general ed paraprofessionals, custodians, those positions. And any adjustment wouldn't feel right unless we were looking wholesale at our permanent positions too. So I feel like we already made that adjustment. We used that strategy already. Are there any questions?
Do you have any theories as to why there's such an increase?
I would say there's three things. One, we have more positions. We have about 10 more teaching positions as opposed to 2019. And so you got more people, you're gonna have more absences. That's one. Two, this year, we're just more cautious with our absences. And so people who maybe in 2019 pre-COVID just kind of pushed through and didn't go to the doctor, didn't take the day off, or didn't take their kid to the doctor, or didn't have their kid take the day off. We're seeing them choose to do that now, which I believe is a good choice in the long run. And the third thing is, and it doesn't really relate to 2019, but it maybe relates to 2020 or 2021. We added back or tried to add back some of our professional development that might take teachers out of the classroom. So CISA offers a lot of good opportunities. You could take a half day or a full day to go to CISA or participate in a virtual CISA professional development, or you could do a curriculum time where you might pull a couple of content area folks together to have a planning day to really set the table for the next PLC. Those are things we tried to bring back a little bit this year, and we've really recognized that we can't do that, not in the face of sub time. So.
Yeah, to that last point, I had sent just today, I sent the administrative team an email indicating for the next 3 months, we're gonna put a little freeze on our out-of-district conference, seminar, meetings, CISA, whatever it might be, because it's contributing to our sub shortage.
Yeah.
And so on one hand, we all recognize the importance of professional growth and development opportunities that are found at those events. But on the other hand, if we're looking for some levers to pull, we're running out of levers to pull to resolve the absenteeism problem in the district, where we have more subs than ever before, but Dave pointed out some numbers of absenteeism. He just cited 3 reasons as to the why for that. We've been experiencing high volume with virus, flu, RSV, COVID, you name it, 'tis the season for the flu, if you will. And as another proactive measure, we're going to kind of put a little freeze on those out of district during the day adventures that cause us to also put a substitute in the classroom, and we'll see how that goes. To be clear, it's not about saving money. It's about having the right people in front of our kids more often. And it's about trying to keep our schools open, because right now, we've had a couple of days where some of our individual schools have had high absenteeism of not just students due to illnesses, but when we have such a shortage of staff, that could cause us to have to close a school. And so we're trying to pull these 2 levers. One is ask the board to approve the increase in sub pay, and the other is we're gonna peel back and taper back on those out of district meetings and see if that doesn't help us kind of weather the winter flu season a little bit.
It's important for people to understand too what the impact is when you don't get a sub. Right, all of a sudden now you're pulling teachers. that have
Specialists.
Prep time, they're not able to prep because they have to go fill in and teach.
Yeah, and we also pull our coaches or our counselors or our school psychs or our principals.
That aren't able to do their regular jobs.
Right.
so.
Right, they still have to do it.
No, I
Just-
They don't have time to do it, right?
Right.
So, Dave, I want to just clarify that you are recommending this $200 for the be permanent for the remainder of the school year. We're not
Right.
necessarily saying what will be in the fall, but this
I
is
think,
for now.
well, I think that
Or are you saying
it's
it's
a
permanent
signal that
forever?
I don't see us going back. So last year when we did this, we thought, well, maybe this is a temporary thing and we can kind of renormalize, and I just don't.
Okay.
I think the evidence shows that we can't. One thing, just the nitty gritty too, so the change would be effective now, so 11/27, or whatever the Monday is, that's when it would take place, but subs would see the change on their 1/5/23 payroll. That's how that kind of rolls out, but just so people are clear with that.
Dave, I got two questions. The first one is, this will help, the $200 will help ensure that we're more likely to get a sub, right, when we're competing on a day is short.
Yep.
Is it also fair to say that we might be able to get the best subs? Do we ever have that? I mean, that we've got to take someone we'd rather not because we can't get
Well,
a sub for that day?
I
Is this
think-
going to allow us to get the best?
Yeah, so we put together, with feedback from subs and feedback from principals, we put together a sub handbook. We did a sub training at the beginning of the year. I think our office staff does a really good job, and our principals do a really good job of welcoming our subs and keeping a supportive eye on our newer subs. I mean, some subs that have been here a while, everybody smiles when they enter because it's like, oh, good, we're good in a good spot. But there's new people, and just helping those new people become acquainted with the district. I think that's a separator, right? Daily rate is a separator, but how welcoming a building is another separator. And I think we've tried to take a lot of steps to do that. And maybe if a sub has a bad day, not just automatically going to, well, we don't want that sub in the building anymore, but really reaching out to that sub and having a conversation about it and taking some corrective actions before we just jettison them to another district.
Okay, good, thanks. Second question is, and I'm willing to move this, but just to get back to Stacy's question here, if I move that we approve this, should we approve it for the rest of the year, or do you want to just approve it? Are you asking us to approve this
It's
personally?
for the remainder of the 2022.
Yeah, I think it's for the remainder of the year, but I'm signaling to the board when we adopt the handbook for 23-24, which is kind of the normal practice, don't anticipate that it's going to go back, which is what happened this year.
Okay, so I'll move it.
Okay, thank you, Ellen. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Thank you, Mike. Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? The motion is carried.
Thanks, Dave.
One of our responsibilities is to review safety school plans on an annual basis. And so, Nate, would you please walk us through what this is, highlighting the consistency among elementary schools, please?
Yeah, so school safety, as you know, is a high priority, the top priority for us in this district, and there are many moving parts associated with it. Each year, we run an internal audit on the practices that we follow in the district and also on all of the buildings. And then we have meetings as admin teams where we talk about safety plans, we figure out what all the drills are that we're going to do, and we make sure that we're consistent in our approach. And what you're being asked with tonight is to approve part of our drill plan or our drill plan series that all of the buildings go through every single year as required by the state of Wisconsin. So in River Falls, we've aligned our drills with the National Association of School Psychologists, the National Association of School Resource Officers, and the Alice Institute. So some pretty reputable groups that have told us that what we're doing is developmentally appropriate for our students. And at all of the schools, not just at the elementaries, but at the middle school and high school, we break down our drills into discussion-based areas, seminars, orientations, and walkthroughs. So at the elementary level, Officer G, who's the resource officer responsible for the elementary and middle school, he will come and talk with our students and staff about how to be safe at school, with the main objective at our level of listening to the classroom teacher. So we also talk about strangers and how to respond and so on and so forth. At the high school and middle school, we've got training videos that are put together by the police. We also have a presentation that our homeroom teachers, our TAs, are sharing with our students that talk about threat reporting and school safety. At the elementary level, we're reading the book I'm Not Scared, I'm Prepared, and having discussion and going through practices with the kids through different activities within that workbook. And then we have an orientation element. Again, now this is all levels, making sure that students have a good sense of what is where within the building. And some of our buildings are pretty expansive, so knowing where the doors are, where certain exits are, how to get to the nurse or the office is obviously really, really important. And then we have the walkthrough component. And the walkthrough can also be called an intruder drill. And we do those both at the elementary and secondary level, but they look a little bit different. So it's important that the board and anyone else who's listening understands that our intruder drills are announced or broadcast drills, meaning we are not surprising anybody by these drills, parents included. In fact, just backing up a second, before we begin doing any of this work, we notify all families in the district that it's going to happen. We let them know how the pieces are gonna roll out, when it's gonna start, when it's gonna be done, and how all of it will work together. We give parents the option to contact us, to reach out, to ask questions, or to even pull their children out if they want to. And I think this year we had maybe just 2 families that said, you know what, we want our students to be involved in the learning element, the lesson component, but we don't necessarily want them to be involved in this part of the drill. So that gives, I guess, me a sense of confidence and also accomplishment that our families have that much trust in us that we're doing things the right way. So back to the intruder drills, they're broadcast at our level, elementary level. We're letting the staff know it's happening. We're coming on and making an announcement like we would in the case of an intruder. And the children are practicing basically their lockdown drill. Most of the time we would barricade the door, find the safe place in the classroom. We would pull the shades. We would be very quiet. And when I say we pull the door, that means it's locked because doors are locked all of the time in the district. We don't ever want to leave to chance that we need to find our keys and lock the doors in a case like this. At the high school level, a slight difference is that we may have people posing as intruders. Now, to be very clear, there's no one running around the building. There's no one dressed a certain way or brandishing a fake weapon of any sort. There's no loud noises. There's no one grabbing or touching. But the reason we do that at the high school and the middle school level, we put an orange vest or a yellow vest on someone, maybe even 2 people, because the decisions that have to be made in a building during a time like this are partially dependent upon what's going on in your area. If you're at an exit or close to an exit and it appears safe to you, getting out is a safe move, although we're beginning to focus more on just hunkering down and hanging in there because we know that our police force would be coming. But again, there's no touching, there's no screaming, there's no yelling, and it's a pretty subdued type of drill for a very serious situation. The outcome of all of that is that we are to fill out a report that the state requires, and although the reports are a little bit varied in terms of what you see, I can assure you that what is happening at Greenwood is happening at Westside, is happening at Rocky Branch, and is happening at the Montessori. And I think if there's some shortcomings in the differences there, that's probably on me for not articulating the thoroughness to which the reports need to be filled out and completed.
Well, it's a sad reality that we need to do these drills, but since we do, it's really important that we're doing them and doing them in an age-appropriate way with notification to parents. So,
I have a couple questions for you. A lot of it, this really heavily relies on our teachers, right, and interacting with our students. How do we prepare our teachers, including our subs?
Yep, great question. So every year as part of our safety plan that I put together and give to principals, we outline different things that have to be done from August 1st until the next school year. One of those things I mentioned is where we do our internal and external audits. Another is we have to talk about school safety with our staff. So our police liaison officers come to our buildings and they basically remind and educate our teachers, in particular our new teachers, about what ALICE is and how that operates for us. I meet with all of the new teachers at our new teacher orientation. And then, you know, it's just making sure that all of our teachers are on board with the different steps. So we have an outline, we give the teachers, here's the dates that it's happening, here's what got sent home, here's how you do it, and it flows pretty well.
I think the substitutes were given an orientation, I believe, at
Yeah, I spoke to the substitutes this year as well. We had a really nice turnout and really good feedback from that also.
And that's another component of what each teacher needs to leave with as part of their sub plans, is the information that would help them prepare as best they can. Obviously, it's not the same thing. But.
Yeah, the depth of understanding that our subs have isn't going to be the same as what our teachers have, but we do have a crisis response flip chart that's meant to be like a quick action. Here's a quick summary. You hear this announcement, it says lockdown, oh my goodness, what do we do? Boom, lockdown, done. So we do have that. We make sure that all of our teachers identify where that is for our substitutes, and it should be in every person's sub-plans.
So I think this is one place that the relationships that our SROs make with our students really shines through, right? And they hear from somebody that they know and trust, and that's, I think that alleviates a lot of the stress and anxiety of this situation, the training. So on the ground, how do our students look and feel these days?
So I don't want to take any credit away from the SROs at all, but I also want to make sure that the teachers do get a lot of credit. The teachers in this district love their kids like they are their own children. And our kids do really well with these things, in part because of the fact that we're approaching the way we go about the work with them as a whole child. How would you like your child to be taught when they're in first grade, second grade, third grade, 8th grade, 11th grade? What would you like if you were a parent of a child? And when we keep those things in mind, we don't forget about the social emotional needs that the kids have. We also don't forget about the academic needs that they have. So we work really hard throughout the district, believing in and, the genius of and, we do this and this, not this or that, trying hard to leave nothing to the side. I think that I can only really speak to my building, but in getting feedback from other buildings, our kids do really well with it. It's not new anymore. These practices have been going on. Although we make small tweaks each and every year, we've been pretty consistent with our practices, and that's a really good thing for our kids.
It's so sad that this is going to become part of their school life, like fire drills, right? So, yeah. Anyway, thank you for all your work on this. Yeah. Such an important area for teachers, students, the whole district to be really on the spot with.
Can I mention one more thing? You know, we're really, really super intentional about this work. In fact, if you were to see the plan layout, we don't start any of these safety discussions until about 3 or 4 weeks after the school year begins. And we know that we're unfortunately rolling the dice a little bit with that. Delaying, reminding kids of our safety practices could be a big deal, but so is starting the year feeling good about it and not having to think about these things. We want to build those relationships and sense of community, trust with the new teachers before we delve into them. So we've tried to identify the sweet spot for that at about the 3-4 week mark, and I think that's been helpful for us too.
Nate, one of the things that occurs to me when Cindy mentions that it's sad we got to be doing this right now, but drills have been part of education for generations. And I'm old enough, maybe the only one in this room was old enough to remember when we did drills for nuclear war. Nuclear bombs saved a number of people in this room, and they didn't do them anymore when they realized there is no drill to protect you from a nuclear bomb. But I can remember doing those and how scary those were as a kid. And so this isn't the first time we've had to deal with this. That doesn't make them any better, but it just, I think there's a lot of parents and grandparents and others out there who can identify with the fact that these drills have to happen. Appreciate, as Cindy said, your work on this. I would just ask, I'm assuming this goes on, but I keep thinking a lot the last few months about what happened in Uvalde, Texas, and the fact that we have traditionally had a very good working relationship with the River Falls Police Department. And I'm assuming that all of the things you're talking about here, we're engaged with River Falls Police Department. they would know immediately what to do in an event of an intruder or something like that, and we would know who those people are. Obviously, as a board, we know our SROs really well, but maybe you could just say something to how we work with the River Falls Police.
Yeah, a lot of that work goes through our SROs, but it's not limited to that. So certainly Chris and Brian have a really good working relationship with me. We talk about our district safety plan, which is much bigger than just if we were to have an intruder. I mean, we have 250 pages of policy and mitigation and response if we have certain issues. And we need to have that because it's really hard to think rationally during those emotionally stressful times. But I've been at the police department. I've met with them. We've gone over our plans. They like them. They even said, hey, we might steal certain elements of the reunification plan. We work with other partners. I've even been in contact with the new Pierce County Sheriff before he was actually the sheriff. They get updated maps of our schools. They bring officers to our schools to tour before the school year to remind them of the layout of the building. Physically being there looking at it is different than having a map that they're looking at, but they all have them downloaded on their computers and their squad cars. We've even talked about access. For instance, the key cards. What if something tragic were to happen where the electronics wouldn't work? Well, we have a plan in place for them to get into our building now if that wasn't able, if they weren't able to do that. So we're not perfect by any stretch of the imagination, but I think we have a really good plan and a really, really good partnership, not just with the police, but also with the larger city, using their repeater for walkie-talkie transmission that now can go district-wide, not just in a building site. So we're working hard at it, and we continue to look at it, and we'll make adjustments as we learn that we need to.
Sure.
I'm going.
I'm
Go
sorry,
ahead.
just one, and Chris, those things happen with your building too, right? I'm looking at Chris Silver. Yeah. You're doing drills and all those kinds of things. All of our buildings are doing this, right?
Yeah, every building does the same drills. They look pretty much the same. The buildings, that's been Chris's biggest challenge, is he's had 4 different buildings in the last handful of years.
Oh, really?
So, you know, it's a new map every year, and where are we going for this, and where are we going for that? Reunification sites are now different places, but yes, we're consistent throughout, and like I said, if there's a shortcoming in the way that the reviews of the drills have gone tonight and what was submitted to you, that's probably on me for not helping people understand the extent and depth that should be reported.
Well, at this point, I'm going to move that we approve the 2022-2023 school safety drill evaluations with the understanding that you'll work with the 2 reports that need to be consistently reflecting what they actually do. Would you be willing to help with that? Thank you.
Absolutely, and I'm confident that there's a lot of deep reflection going on.
All right. So I've made the motion. Is there a second?
Second.
Thank you, Bob. Any further discussion? Thank you for all that you do. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. The motion, nobody opposed, so the motion is carried. At this point, do we have any proposed or suggested items for future agendas? I want to say very briefly 2 things. That last Thursday, we had a groundbreaking ceremony for the Renaissance. It was really fun. There was a busload of kids. They helped to shovel the snow and the dirt. It was cold out there. The city presented us with a City of River Falls flag that could be flown from a flagpole. With a fish, yes.
It's a cool flag. It's really kind of a cool flag.
So, and at that point, they were talking about that they were so happy that the city has a strong relationship with the school district. So it was a really nice event. I also want to make sure that we say thank you to Pat Knox and his team in the food service department for making such a very nice potato bar and assortments of pies for American Educators Week. I told each one of them that I saw they had to create their own thank you lunch. So we have to make sure to thank the cooks for that. So at this point, we're going to set upcoming meetings. The Educational Program Committee will not be meeting. Thank you.
Did you get that, Mike?
All right, Mike. Finance and Facilities will meet Monday, December 12th at 6 o'clock. Personnel will meet Monday, December 12th at 7 or immediately following F&F. The next regular board meeting will be Monday, December 19th at 6 o'clock. Those meetings will all take place here. And at this point, I request a motion to move into executive session pursuant to Wisconsin State Statute, Section 1985, 1A and F, for the purpose of conducting a pupil expulsion hearing and for deliberations thereafter. Is there a motion, please?
So moved.
Thank you, Ellen. A second. Thanks, Bob. I need a roll call. Mike?
Yes.
Bob?
Yes.
Alan?
Yes.
I'm saying yes, Cindy. We're going to take a recess of 4 minutes, and then we're coming back. Let's see, Kit, could you help move a table up there, please? Thank you. That last one, Bob?
Thank you.